The thunder of hooves broke the evening silence as Willow Daniels ran toward the creek, her auburn hair streaming behind her like a banner of rebellion. She had just overheard her father's plan to marry her off to a cattle baron from Texas, a man 3 times her age whom she had never met, and the revelation sent her fleeing from the only home she'd ever known. This was 1875 in the rugged territory of Colorado, where a woman's choice meant little against a father's will. But Willow was determined to write her own destiny. The dirt kicked up beneath her boots as she reached the water's edge, her chest heaving with exertion and anger. At 20 years old, she had spent her life on their modest ranch, helping her father rebuild after her mother's death 7 years prior. But that didn't give him the right to trade her like cattle. "I won't do it," she whispered to herself, picking up a stone and hurling it into the creek, watching ripples disturb the sunset's reflection. "I won't marry a stranger just to save his pride or his land." A twig snapped behind her. Willow spun around, reaching for the small knife she kept in her boot, a gift from her mother who had always told her that a woman needed to protect herself in this wild country. "Easy there," came a deep voice. "I'm not looking for trouble." The man who emerged from the brush stood tall against the dying light. His dark hair curled beneath a worn Stetson, and his eyes keen as a hawk's assessed her with quiet concern. He wore trail-worn clothes, a bandana loose around his neck, and carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who knew the land and its dangers. "Tucker Xavier," he introduced himself, keeping a respectful distance. "Your father sent hands out looking for you, said you'd run off after an argument." Willow's grip on her knife tightened. "You work for my father." Tucker shook his head, the ghost of a smile on his lips. "No, madam, just arrived this morning looking for ranch work. Your father said he might have a position if I helped find his wayward daughter first." He tilted his head, studying her flushed face, though he didn't mention why his daughter might be running away. "Because he's selling me," Willow blurted, her voice cracking with emotion. "To a man named Hollies who has more cows than kindness, from what I hear. All because we're behind on our mortgage payments and Hollies has offered to clear the debt if I become his wife." Tucker's expression darkened. "A bride price? That's not right." "No, it isn't," Willow agreed, surprised by this stranger's immediate understanding. Most men in these parts would have seen such an arrangement as perfectly sensible. "Well," Tucker said after a moment of consideration, "I reckon we should head back before it gets too dark and the coyotes start their night music, but I won't be dragging you back against your will." Willow hesitated, then slowly lowered her knife. There was something in his eyes, a steadiness, a respect that she rarely saw in men when they looked at her. "And what will you tell my father when he asks why you didn't bring me back?" Tucker adjusted his hat and smiled, a genuine warmth breaking through his weathered features. "The truth, that you'll return when you're ready and you'll marry when you choose, not a moment sooner." The words hung in the air between them, a promise and a challenge. Willow felt something stir within her, not just gratitude for this stranger's unexpected alliance, but a spark of something else, something that made her heart beat a little faster. "I do need to go back," she admitted finally. "I can't abandon the ranch my mother loved, even if my father seems intent on giving it away along with me." Tucker nodded, understanding in his gaze. "Then let me walk with you. The night's getting cold." They walked in silence for a while, the first stars appearing overhead. Willow stole glances at her companion, wondering what kind of man would stand up for a woman he'd just met against her own father. "Where are you from, Mr. Xavier?" she asked finally. "Tucker, please," he corrected gently. "All over, I suppose." "Born in Missouri, fought for the Union in the war when I was barely 18, then drifted west afterward. Couldn't settle back home after what I'd seen." Willow nodded, understanding in her heart what he didn't say. The war had changed everything, even out here in the territories. Men had returned different if they returned at all. "And what brings you to our little corner of nowhere?" Tucker's laugh was soft, like distant thunder. "Heard there was good grazing land, honest work, and people who minded their own business. 3 things I value highly." As they approached the ranch house, lights glowed in the windows, warm against the gathering darkness. But Willow felt her steps growing heavier with each yard. "He'll be furious," she murmured. Tucker stopped, turning to face her fully. "Miss Daniels, your father may own this ranch, but he doesn't own you. Remember that." Before she could respond, the front door swung open. Harold Daniels stood framed in the doorway, his imposing figure backlit by the lamps inside. At 55, he was still strong as an oak, with hands hardened by decades of ranching. His beard had gone gray years ago, but his eyes remained sharp and now blazed with anger. "Willow Elizabeth Daniels," he called out, his voice carrying across the yard. "Get yourself in this house right now." His gaze shifted to Tucker. "And you, I sent you to bring her back, not take a moonlight stroll." Tucker stepped forward, positioning himself slightly ahead of Willow in a subtle gesture of protection that didn't go unnoticed by either Daniels. "Mr. Daniels," Tucker said evenly, "your daughter's returning of her own accord. She's upset about certain arrangements you've made without her consent, arrangements involving her future." Harold's face flushed red beneath his weathered tan. "That's family business, Cowboy, not yours." "Perhaps," Tucker conceded, "but I won't stand by while a woman is forced into marriage, family business or not." A tense silence fell across the yard. Willow could feel her heart pounding against her ribs as her father's gaze bore into Tucker, measuring him, assessing the threat in this newcomer who dared challenge him. Finally, Harold spat into the dirt. "We'll discuss this inside, both of you." The kitchen was warm, but the atmosphere frigid as Harold poured himself a generous whiskey. He didn't offer one to Tucker or Willow. The old grandfather clock in the corner ticked loudly, marking each silent second. "Mr. Hollies will be here tomorrow," Harold finally said, addressing Willow while pointedly ignoring Tucker. "He's bringing the papers to clear our debt and discuss the wedding arrangements. You'll be civil and grateful for his generosity." Willow's hands trembled in her lap, but her voice remained steady. "I won't marry him, Father. I don't know him. I don't love him." Harold slammed his glass down. "Love? You think your mother and I loved each other when we married. Love comes with time, girl. Right now we need security. This ranch is all we have, and I'm not losing it because you've got romantic notions from those novels you hide under your bed." Tucker, who had remained standing near the door, spoke up. "Mr. Daniels, surely there are other ways to save your ranch. A loan from the bank in Denver, perhaps. Or selling some of your stock. You think I haven't tried?" Harold turned his frustration on Tucker. "The banks won't lend to a widower with outstanding debts, and we'd have to sell nearly everything to make a dent. Hollies is offering a clean slate." "At the cost of your daughter's freedom," Tucker pointed out. "Freedom?" Harold laughed bitterly. "What freedom does a woman have out here except to starve or marry? At least with Hollies, she'll never go hungry." Willow stood so abruptly that her chair scraped loudly against the wooden floor. "I'd rather starve than be sold. Father, Mother would never have allowed this." "Your mother isn't here," Harold roared, a vein pulsing in his forehead. "She left us to manage on our own, and I'm doing the best I can with what we have." The raw pain in her father's voice made Willow flinch. 7 years, and he still spoke of her mother's death as an abandonment. In that moment, she saw not just his anger but his fear, the terror of failing, of losing everything, of being unable to provide for his only child. "Father," she said more gently, "we'll find another way." I can work harder, take in mending from town, maybe even teach at the school, but I cannot marry a man I don't know and don't respect." Harold's shoulders slumped slightly, the fight draining out of him. "Holly's will be here tomorrow," he repeated, his voice tired. "We'll discuss it then." He looked at Tucker with narrowed eyes. "You still want that job, Cowboy?" Tucker nodded once. "Yes, sir, if it's still offered. Bunkhouse is out back with the other hands. Dawn comes early around here." Harold drained his whiskey and set down the glass with finality. "Willow, to your room. We're done for tonight." As Willow climbed the narrow stairs to her bedroom, she caught Tucker's gaze. In that brief moment, something passed between them, an understanding, a promise. She wasn't alone in this fight anymore. The next morning dawned clear and crisp, the kind of autumn day that hinted at winter's approach without surrendering summer's warmth. Willow had barely slept, her mind racing with plans and fears in equal measure. She dressed with particular care in her best day dress, not to impress Holly's, but to armor herself with dignity for the battle ahead. When she descended the stairs, she found her father and Tucker in the kitchen. An uneasy truce established as they drank coffee in silence. Tucker stood when she entered, a small gesture that didn't go unnoticed by Harold. "Mr. Holly's will be here by noon," her father informed her without preamble. "Tucker here has agreed to show you the boundaries of what would become Holly's property after the merger. I think you should see what's at stake." Willow shot Tucker a questioning look, which he answered with the slightest nod of reassurance. "Fine," she agreed, reaching for her shawl. "Let's go." Once outside and safely beyond her father's hearing, Willow turned to Tucker. "What are you planning?" "My father would never willingly send me off alone with a man who questioned his authority last night." Tucker's mouth quirked into a half-smile. "I may have suggested to your father that seeing the full extent of the Daniels ranch might help you understand the gravity of losing it. He seemed to think that was sensible." "And is that really why you offered to show me around?" Willow challenged, though she couldn't help returning his smile. "No, madam," Tucker admitted, helping her onto a sturdy mare while he mounted his own horse. "I wanted to talk to you without your father breathing down our necks, and I thought you might want to see something special before Holly's arrives." Curiosity piqued, Willow followed Tucker as they rode away from the ranch house, past the grazing cattle, and toward the foothills that marked the western boundary of her father's land. They rode mostly in silence, though it was a comfortable one, punctuated only by Tucker occasionally pointing out features of the landscape or naming birds that darted across their path. After nearly an hour of riding, they crested a small rise, and Tucker reined in his horse. "Here we are." Willow gasped softly. Below them stretched a hidden valley, sheltered by rocky outcroppings and filled with aspen trees whose leaves had turned golden in the autumn light. A small creek meandered through it, widening into a clear pool at the center. It was a secret paradise, untouched by cattle or men. "How did you know about this place?" she asked, dismounting to better take in the view. Tucker joined her, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cool air. "I didn't until this morning. I rode out at dawn to scout the property. Your father mentioned boundaries, but not this. I doubt he knows it exists. It's not visible from any of the main trails." Willow walked forward, letting her fingers trail through the golden aspen leaves. "I had no idea this was here either, all these years." She turned back to Tucker, suddenly understanding. "You're showing me what I'd be giving up if I left." "What you'd be giving up if you married a man you don't love," Tucker corrected gently. "This land is in your blood, Miss Daniels. I see it in how you walk, how you breathe the air here. But land without freedom is just pretty scenery in a prison yard." His words struck her deeply, articulating feelings she hadn't been able to name. "What choice do I have? My father is right about one thing: we'll lose everything if Holly's doesn't clear our debts. Tucker stepped closer, his eyes intense. There are always choices, even when they don't seem obvious. I've been asking around among the other hands. Your father is a proud man who won't accept charity, but he might accept a business proposition. What kind of business proposition could save us now? Willow asked, hope warring with skepticism in her heart. One that involves my savings, Tucker said simply. I've been working cattle drives for 7 years, living cheap and saving nearly everything. It's not a fortune, but it might be enough to clear your most pressing debts and buy time for your father to turn things around. Willow stared at him in disbelief. Why would you do that? You barely know us. Tucker looked away for a moment as if gathering his thoughts. When he looked back, there was something vulnerable in his expression that made Willow's heart skip. Because I've seen what happens when people's choices are taken from them. Because I believe in doing what's right, even when it's not easy. He paused, then added more softly, and because something tells me that helping you is exactly where I'm meant to be right now. The intensity of his gaze made Willow's cheeks flush. She hadn't expected this, not just his offer of help, but the way he looked at her, as if truly seeing her. Not as a solution to a problem or a prize to be claimed, but as a woman with dreams and dignity of her own. My father won't take your money, she said finally, practical despite the emotions swirling within her. He's too proud and he'd see it as charity. Tucker's smile returned. That's why it won't be charity. It'll be an investment. I'll buy a partial stake in the ranch, become a partner rather than just a hired hand. We work together to make it profitable again, and eventually, I can either stay on as partner or your father can buy me out when things improve. It was a bold plan, perhaps even a crazy one. Yet as Willow considered it, she couldn't help feeling a surge of hope. Do you really think it could work? I do, Tucker said with quiet confidence. But first, we need to convince your father to turn down Holly's before he arrives. And that might be the hardest part of all. They rode back to the ranch in thoughtful silence, each turning over the possibilities in their minds. As they approached, Willow spotted a cloud of dust on the horizon, a rider approaching from the east. Her stomach knotted with dread. Holly's is early, she murmured. Tucker's expression hardened. Then we'd better hurry. They urged their horses to a gallop, racing back to the ranch house. As they dismounted in the yard, Harold emerged from the house, dressed in his Sunday best despite it being a Tuesday. His face was grim as he watched them approach. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "Holly's will be here any minute, and you're covered in dust and looking like a wild thing, Willow." "Father, please," Willow began urgently. "You need to hear us out before Holly's arrives." "Tucker has a proposition." "Enough," Harold cut her off, his patience clearly worn thin. "I've indulged your tantrums, girl, but this ends now. Go inside and make yourself presentable." Tucker stepped forward. "Mr. Daniels, sir, with all due respect, I'd like to discuss an alternative to your arrangement with Holly's. One that doesn't involve your daughter sacrificing her future." Harold's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You've got nerve, boy. I hired you to work cattle, not meddle in my family affairs." "I understand that, sir," Tucker persisted, "but I'm offering a legitimate business proposal. A partnership that would inject enough capital to clear your immediate debts and give us time to make the ranch profitable again." A flicker of something curiosity, perhaps, or desperate hope crossed Harold's weathered face before he suppressed it. "What kind of capital are we talking about? And what would you want in return?" Before Tucker could answer, the sound of approaching hooves drew their attention. A man rode into the yard on a magnificent black stallion, followed by 2 mounted companions who were clearly hired guns rather than ranch hands, judging by the way they carried themselves and the visible weapons at their sides. Augustus Hollies was not what Willow had expected. Rather than the elderly, corpulent man she had imagined, he was perhaps 45, lean and hard as jerky left too long in the sun. His clothes were fine Eastern-cut suit despite the Western setting, gold watch chain glinting across his vest, but there was nothing soft or civilized about his face. His eyes were pale, almost colorless, and they fixed on Willow with an assessing gaze that made her skin crawl. "Harold Daniels," Hollies called out, dismounting with fluid grace that belied his age. "I see you have my bride to be waiting to greet me." His voice was surprisingly cultured, with the lingering trace of a southern accent. Harold straightened, all business now that his potential savior had arrived. "Hollies, you're earlier than expected." "I find it pays to be unpredictable in business," Hollies replied smoothly, removing his gloves as he approached. His gaze remained fixed on Willow. "And is this the lovely Willow I've heard so much about? The descriptions didn't do you justice, my dear." Tucker moved subtly, positioning himself between Willow and Hollies without being obvious about it. The movement wasn't lost on Hollies, whose pale eyes flicked to Tucker with sudden interest. "And who might this be?" Hollies inquired, his tone pleasant but his eyes cold. "New hand," Harold said dismissively. "Tucker Xavier just started yesterday." Hollies smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. "Well, Mr. Xavier, you're dismissed for now. Mr. Daniels and I have business to discuss with the young lady." Tucker didn't move. "Actually, sir, we were just discussing some business of our own that might interest Mr. Daniels." Hollies' smile tightened. "Is that so?" He turned to Harold. "I thought our arrangement was settled, Daniels. The paperwork is ready, as is the bank draft that will clear all your debts." Harold looked uncomfortable, caught between desperation and the sudden possibility of an alternative. "Perhaps we should go inside and discuss matters properly. All of us," he added, with a significant look at Tucker that made it clear he wanted to hear more about this mysterious proposal. The atmosphere in the Daniels parlor crackled with tension as Harold poured whiskey for himself and Hollies. Tucker declined with a polite shake of his head, standing near the window where he could keep an eye on Hollies' men who remained outside. Willow sat stiffly on the edge of the settee, her back straight as a ramrod. "Now then," Hollies said after taking a measured sip of his whiskey, "let's dispense with this interruption so we can proceed. What's this business proposition that couldn't wait, young man?" Tucker met Hollies' gaze directly. "I'm offering to buy into the Daniels ranch as a partner. I have enough saved to clear the most pressing debts and provide operating capital until the next season." Hollies laughed, a sharp sound devoid of humor. "And where would a cowhand get that kind of money?" "Are you hiding a rich daddy somewhere, boy?" "No, sir," Tucker replied evenly. "Just years of hard work and careful saving. I've been on cattle drives from Texas to Montana, worked silver mines in Nevada, and done my share of breaking horses for the Army. It adds up when you don't spend it on whiskey and women." Harold leaned forward, interest evident despite his skepticism. "How much exactly are we talking about, Tucker?" $5,000, Tucker said. "Cash, plus my skills and labor to help turn things around." Willow fought to keep her expression neutral, but her mind was reeling. $5,000 was a small fortune for a working cowboy. How had he accumulated so much? And why would he risk it all on their struggling ranch? Hollies set down his glass with deliberate care. "That's a touching offer, Mr. Xavier, but I'm afraid it falls short. The Daniels' debt to me is over $7,000, accumulated over the past 3 seasons of poor yields and bad luck." He turned to Harold. "Isn't that right, Harold?" Harold nodded grimly. "With interest, it's closer to 8,000 now." Willow felt her heart sink. Tucker's generous offer wouldn't be enough after all, but Tucker didn't seem deterred. 5,000 now, he continued, with a promissory note for the remaining amount to be paid within 2 years, with reasonable interest. The Daniels cattle are good stock. What they need is better access to water through the dry season and protection from rustlers who have been hitting ranches all through this territory. Both problems I can help solve. Harold frowned. What do you know about our water problems? Your foreman mentioned it this morning when I was helping move cattle to the south pasture, Tucker explained. And I noticed your fences are down in several places along the eastern border, perfect access points for rustlers. Hollis was watching Tucker with new intensity, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by calculation. You seem unusually interested in the Daniels affairs for a man who arrived yesterday. One might wonder about your motives. Tucker met his gaze steadily. My motives are simple. I've been looking for land to settle on, a place worth investing in. This is good country with good people. His eyes briefly found Willow's before returning to Holly's, and I believe in a person's right to choose their own path. The implication hung in the air like gunsmoke. Holly's face hardened, the veneer of civilization slipping just enough to reveal something dangerous beneath. How noble, Holly said coldly. But I'm afraid you're too late, Cowboy. Harold and I have an understanding that goes beyond mere money. He reached into his jacket and produced a folded document. These papers not only clear his debt, but include a transfer of mineral rights I've recently discovered may be quite valuable on the north section of his property. Harold's head snapped up. Mineral rights. You never mentioned minerals, Hollis. Didn't I? Hollis's voice was smooth as snake oil. A mere oversight, I assure you. Preliminary surveys suggest there might be copper deposits worth developing. Nothing certain, of course, which is why I didn't want to get your hopes up. Tucker's expression darkened. So this isn't just about debt or even marriage. It's about mining rights you want to secure cheaply by forcing a desperate man to sell his daughter along with his land. Hollis's hand moved casually toward his jacket where Willow suddenly realized he likely carried a concealed weapon. Careful, boy. You're making accusations that could get you hurt. The tension in the room reached a breaking point. Harold stood abruptly, moving between the two men. That's enough. No one's getting hurt in my house. He turned to Hollis. Is this true about the copper? Hollis shrugged elegantly. It's a possibility, nothing guaranteed, but if it pans out, it could make this worthless ranch quite valuable indeed. And that's why you're so interested in marrying my daughter. Harold's voice had gone dangerously quiet. To ensure you control those rights regardless of what happens. I wouldn't put it so crudely, Hollis responded, unruffled. Marriage is a sensible business arrangement in our society. Your daughter gets security and status. I get a young wife and potential heirs. The mineral rights are simply an additional consideration. Willow could no longer remain silent. I am not a consideration in anyone's business arrangement, she said, rising to her feet. And I will not marry a man who sees me as nothing more than a means to acquire property. Hollis regarded her with cold amusement. You have spirit, girl. I like that. It'll make breaking you all the more satisfying. Tucker moved so quickly that no one saw it coming. One moment he was by the window, the next he had Hollis by the collar, lifted nearly off his feet. You don't speak to her like that, he growled, his voice low and dangerous. Not ever. Hollis didn't struggle, his pale eyes glittering with malice. You've just made a very serious mistake, Cowboy. My men outside won't take kindly to you manhandling their employer. Harold grabbed Tucker's arm. Let him go, son. This isn't helping. For a tense moment, Tucker didn't move, his eyes locked with Hollis's in a battle of wills. Then, slowly, he released his grip and stepped back, though he remained positioned protectively near Willow. Holly straightened his jacket with exaggerated care. "I'll overlook that temporary insanity, Mr. Xavier, if you leave now and never return to this property." "That's not your decision to make," Harold interjected, surprising everyone in the room. He turned to face Holly's fully. "This is still my ranch, and I decide who stays and who goes." Something had changed in Harold Daniels. The desperate, defeated man of recent days had been replaced by the proud rancher Willow remembered from her childhood. His spine had straightened, his jaw set with determination. "I appreciate the offer to clear my debts, Hollies," he continued, "but I think we need to renegotiate terms. No marriage, for starters. My daughter is not part of any deal we make." Hollies' face darkened. "You're in no position to renegotiate, Daniels. I can call in your debts tomorrow and have the sheriff auction this place by the end of the week." "You could," Harold agreed, "but then you'd have to bid against others for those mineral rights you're so interested in. Word about copper has a way of traveling fast in mining country." He glanced at Tucker. "And it seems I have another offer on the table to consider." Willow watched in astonishment as her father transformed before her eyes, reclaiming his dignity and authority. For the first time, she saw clearly what her mother must have loved in him, not just the hard-working rancher, but the man of principle beneath the gruff exterior. Hollies' expression calculated, reassessing the situation. "I see. Perhaps I've been hasty. I'm a reasonable man, Daniels. We can discuss terms without involving personal arrangements." His gaze flicked dismissively to Willow. "Though I think you're making a mistake. She would have been well provided for." "My daughter can provide for herself just fine," Harold replied firmly. "Now, I suggest we all take some time to consider our positions. Come back tomorrow, Hollies, and we'll discuss a strictly business arrangement regarding the debts and possibly a partnership on exploring those mineral rights if they exist." The dismissal was clear. For a moment, Hollies looked as though he might object, his face flushing with suppressed anger. Then, with visible effort, he regained his composure and nodded stiffly. "Very well, Daniels, tomorrow it is, but my patience is not unlimited." He turned to leave, pausing to level a cold stare at Tucker. "As for you, Cowboy, I'd watch my back if I were you. Colorado can be dangerous country for men who don't mind their own business." With that parting threat, Holly stalked from the house. They heard him bark orders at his men, followed by the sound of horses galloping away. The silence that followed was profound. Harold moved to the window, watching until Hollies and his men were out of sight, then turned to face Tucker and Willow. "Well," he said finally, "it seems we have some talking to do." For hours, the three of them sat at the kitchen table, discussing options, plans, and possibilities. Harold was skeptical of Tucker's offer at first, questioning where the money had come from and why he would risk it on their struggling ranch. Tucker explained that he'd been paid well for dangerous work over the years, including a significant bonus for a particularly treacherous cattle drive through Comanche territory that few men had been willing to attempt. "I've been looking for the right place to put down roots," Tucker explained. "Somewhere with good land and good people. When I rode in yesterday and saw your operation, I knew this could be it even before I met your daughter," he added with a glance at Willow that made her cheeks warm. Harold studied Tucker thoughtfully. "And you're willing to risk everything you've saved on a place you've known for less than 2 days." "Sometimes you just know, sir," Tucker replied simply. "My father used to say a man should trust his gut about 3 things. A storm coming, a horse about to buck, and the place he's meant to call home." Willow found herself believing him, though caution whispered that it seemed too convenient, too perfect a solution appearing just when they needed it most. "What happens if there really is copper on the north section?" she asked. "Hollies won't give up easily if there's money to be made." Then we deal with that when we know for sure, Harold said with newfound resolve. But we'll do it on our terms, not his. By the time the grandfather clock struck midnight, they had hammered out an agreement. Tucker would provide the immediate funds needed to stave off foreclosure, becoming a one-third partner in the ranch. Harold would retain controlling interest, with Willow formally acknowledged as holding the final third, a detail her father insisted on that brought tears to her eyes. Together, they would work to make the operation profitable again, starting with repairs to fencing and developing better water access for the cattle. As for Holly's, they would offer him a limited partnership in exploring the mineral rights only if he agreed to forgive a portion of the debt in exchange. If he refused, they would find other investors once the ranch was on firmer footing. It won't be easy, Harold warned as they concluded their discussion. Even with Tucker's investment, we'll be working dawn to dusk to turn things around, and Holly's won't take this lying down. We've never been afraid of hard work, Willow reminded him, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. And we won't be intimidated by threats. Tucker nodded in agreement. I've faced worse than men like Holly's. We'll be ready for whatever comes. As they prepared to retire for the night, Harold paused at the foot of the stairs, looking back at Tucker, who was heading to the bunkhouse. Xavier, he called, be here at dawn. We've got papers to draw up before Holly's returns. Tucker touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement. Yes, sir. I'll be here. Harold hesitated, then added gruffly, and thank you for standing up for my daughter when I was too blind to see what I was doing. Without waiting for a response, he climbed the stairs, leaving Tucker and Willow alone in the kitchen. Willow approached Tucker slowly, suddenly shy despite the intensity of everything they'd shared. I don't know how to thank you, she said softly. Not just for the money, but for making my father see me as more than just a burden or a bargaining chip. Tucker's eyes were gentle in the lamplight. You don't need to thank me for treating you with the respect you deserve, Miss Daniels. Willow, she corrected with a small smile. After today, I think you've earned the right to use my given name. Willow, he repeated, the name sounding different, special in his deep voice. I meant what I said earlier, about people having the right to choose their own path. He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully, including who they marry or if they marry at all. The unspoken question hung between them, delicate as morning mist. Willow felt her heart quicken. I've always believed that marriage should be a choice made freely by two people who respect each other, who see each other as equals. She met his gaze steadily, who perhaps might grow to love each other given time. Tucker's smile was slow and warm, lighting his eyes from within. That sounds like the kind of marriage worth waiting for. The night air was cool as Tucker walked to the bunkhouse, but he hardly felt it. His mind was filled with plans, possibilities, and the memory of Willow's smile as they parted. He hadn't planned for any of this when he rode onto the Daniels ranch yesterday, looking for temporary work. Yet somehow, in the space of 2 days, he'd found something he hadn't even known. He was searching for a place that could become home, and people who already felt like family. As he settled onto his bunk, nodding greetings to the other ranch hands who regarded him with curious respect after the day's events, Tucker knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges. Holly's wouldn't surrender easily, and turning the ranch around would require months of backbreaking work and careful management. But for the first time in years, the future looked like more than just the next job, the next town, the next sunrise. It looked like something worth fighting for. Dawn arrived with a soft golden light that filtered through the windows of the ranch house as Willow dressed for the day ahead. She chose practical clothes, a sturdy skirt and blouse that wouldn't hinder her movements as she went about her chores. Today was not a day for looking pretty. It was a day for working alongside the men to begin the ranch's recovery. When she entered the kitchen, she found Tucker already seated at the table with her father, papers spread between them as they discussed terms of their partnership. Both men rose when she appeared, a courtesy that brought a smile to her face. "Good morning," she greeted them, moving to the stove to prepare breakfast. "I trust you've had a productive start." "Indeed we have," Harold confirmed, a new energy in his voice that had been missing for months. "Tucker's been sharing some ideas for improving water access to the north pastures that make a lot of sense." Tucker nodded, his eyes following Willow as she moved about the kitchen. "Your father knows this land better than anyone. Together, I think we can make significant improvements before winter sets in." The domestic scene felt strangely natural, as if Tucker had always been part of their household rather than a man who had entered their lives just days ago. As they ate breakfast and continued discussing plans, Willow found herself studying him when he wasn't looking the way his hands moved as he explained his ideas, the thoughtful furrow of his brow as he listened to her father, the quiet confidence he exuded without arrogance. Harold noticed too. She caught her father watching them, a mixture of wariness and reluctant approval in his eyes. After breakfast, as Tucker went to confer with the foreman about the day's work, Harold held Willow back with a gentle hand on her arm. "You like him," her father said simply, no question in his voice. Willow didn't deny it. "I do, he's a good man." Harold nodded slowly. "Seems to be, but we don't know much about him, Willow. Men with money and skills like his don't usually drift into small ranches looking for work. There might be more to his story." "I'm sure there is," Willow agreed. "Just as there's more to everyone's story. But whatever brought him here, I'm grateful for it." Harold squeezed her arm gently before releasing it. "Just be careful with your heart, daughter. I know I haven't been the father you deserved lately, too caught up in my own worries to see what I was doing to you, but I do care about your happiness." The admission, so rare from her stoic father, brought tears to Willow's eyes. "I know, Father, and I'm being careful, but sometimes life surprises you with exactly what you need, even if it wasn't what you expected." Harold's weathered face softened. "Your mother used to say something similar. She'd say God works in mysterious ways that only make sense when you look back on them." He cleared his throat, emotion making his voice rough. "Maybe she sent Tucker our way. Lord knows we needed the help." Before Willow could respond to this unprecedented display of sentiment from her father, the sound of approaching riders drew their attention. Through the window, they could see Holly's returning as promised, though this time with 4 men instead of 2. "Here we go," Harold muttered, straightening his shoulders. "Let's hope he's in a more reasonable mood today." Tucker joined them on the porch as Holly's and his men dismounted. The cattle baron looked more imposing than ever in a black suit and hat, his pale eyes taking in the scene with calculated assessment. "Daniels," he greeted Harold coolly. "I see your new partner is still here." Harold nodded once. "Mr. Xavier and I have come to an arrangement. We've drawn up papers this morning that outline a new proposal regarding our business." Holly's expression remained neutral, but Willow noticed his men spreading out slightly, positioning themselves strategically around the yard. The movement wasn't lost on Tucker either, whose posture shifted subtly, ready for trouble. "I'm listening," Holly said, making no move to enter the house or dismount. Harold stepped forward, papers in hand. "We're prepared to offer you a partnership in exploring the mineral rights on the north section, a 50% stake in any findings. In exchange, you'll reduce our debt by half, with the remainder to be paid within 18 months. Holly's laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. "That's your counter-offer. Half my money for a gamble on copper that might not pan out." He shook his head. You're in no position to negotiate, Daniels. I want full payment or I take the ranch. That's where you're wrong, Tucker interjected calmly. Mr. Daniels is now in a position to clear his debts outright, if necessary. He reached into his jacket and produced a bank draft, holding it up so Hollis could see the amount. But we're offering you something potentially more valuable than immediate repayment. Hollis's eyes narrowed as he considered this development. And where did a ranch hand suddenly get that kind of money, I wonder? Perhaps the law might be interested in how you came by such a sum. Tucker smiled thinly. The money's legitimate, Hollis. Every cent earned honestly and accounted for. I'd be happy to provide references from the banks in Denver and Santa Fe, where I've done business for years. A tense silence fell as Hollis weighed his options. Willow could almost see the calculations happening behind those cold eyes, the certainty of immediate payment versus the potential for greater profit if the copper deposits proved substantial. Finally, Hollis nodded sharply. I want 60% of the mineral rights and payment in full by the end of 12 months, not 18. Harold glanced at Tucker, who gave a nearly imperceptible nod. 55%. Harold countered, and 15 months for full payment with no interest accruing during that time. Another calculation behind those pale eyes. Agreed, Hollis said finally. Draw up the papers. I'll have my lawyer review them when they're ready. The tension eased slightly, though Willow noticed that Hollis's men remained alert, hands never far from their weapons. This wasn't over not by a long shot, but they had bought themselves time and a measure of security. One more thing, Hollis added, his gaze sliding to Willow. I expect to be a welcomed guest at this ranch whenever I come to inspect my investment. No more unpleasantness. Before her father could respond, Willow stepped forward. You'll be treated with the same respect you show us, Mr. Hollis. Nothing more, nothing less. Hollis's mouth tightened, but he inclined his head in acknowledgement of her spirit. Fair enough, Miss Daniels. I look forward to our future association. The way he said it left little doubt that he hadn't given up entirely on his original intentions. As Hollis and his men prepared to depart, he paused beside Tucker. You've made a powerful enemy today, Xavier, he said quietly, for Tucker's ears alone. I don't forget those who interfere with my plans. Tucker met his gaze steadily. Neither do I, Hollis. Remember that if you're thinking of causing trouble here. With a final cold smile, Hollis mounted his horse and led his men away, the dust of their departure hanging in the air like a promise of storms to come. Well, Harold said as they watched the riders disappear into the distance, I'd say that went better than expected. But we've made an enemy we can't afford to underestimate, Tucker nodded grimly. I've known men like Hollis before. He won't give up easily, especially where money is concerned. He turned to Willow, his expression softening. But we'll be ready. We. The word warmed Willow's heart even as she recognized the challenges ahead. Somehow, in the midst of crisis, they had become a unit, her father, and this surprising man who had ridden into their lives like an answer to prayers she hadn't even known she was sending. The days that followed took on a rhythm of hard work and cautious hope. True to his word, Tucker invested not just his money but his considerable skills in improving the ranch. He worked alongside the other hands from dawn until dusk, mending fences, moving cattle to better grazing areas, and beginning the construction of a series of small dams and irrigation channels that would ensure water access during the dry months. Willow found herself drawn to him more with each passing day. It wasn't just his undeniable physical appeal, though she couldn't help noticing the strength in his shoulders as he worked, or the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. It was the respect he showed to everyone, from her father down to the youngest stable boy. The way he listened when she spoke, treating her ideas with the same consideration as any man's. The gentle patience he exhibited with fractious horses and new calves alike. Most evenings, after the day's work was done, the three of them would gather at the kitchen table to discuss progress and plans. These meetings gradually evolved into something more personal as Harold began to relax his guard, sharing stories of the ranch's early days and, occasionally, memories of Willow's mother that he had kept locked away for years. Tucker shared stories of his childhood in Missouri as the son of a blacksmith, his experiences during the war that had left him both stronger and more aware of life's fragility, his years of wandering that had taught him the value of finding a place to belong. One evening, about 2 weeks after Tucker's arrival, Harold retired early, leaving Tucker and Willow alone by the fireplace. The autumn nights were growing colder, and the fire cast a warm glow over the room as they sat in comfortable silence, each lost in thought. "Penny for your thoughts," Tucker said finally, his voice soft in the quiet room. Willow smiled, looking up from the mending in her lap. "I was thinking about change, how quickly life can transform when you least expect it." Tucker nodded, understanding in his eyes. "For better or worse?" "For better, I think," Willow replied, setting aside her sewing. "Though I keep waiting for the other boot to drop, as my father would say. Holly's has been too quiet." "He's biding his time," Tucker agreed. "Men like him always do, but we're making progress every day, strengthening our position." Willow studied him in the firelight, gathering her courage to ask the question that had been on her mind. "Why did you really come here, Tucker? Of all the ranches in Colorado, why this one?" Tucker was silent for a long moment, his face thoughtful. "Would you believe me if I said I wasn't entirely sure myself?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I've been drifting for years, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. Something about this place called to me when I rode in that day. I can't explain it better than that." "And now," Willow asked softly, "do you still feel that call?" Tucker's eyes met hers, warm and certain, more strongly than ever. The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken feelings. Willow's heart beat faster as Tucker rose from his chair and came to kneel beside hers, taking her hands gently in his. "Willow," he said, her name like a prayer on his lips. "I know it hasn't been long. I know you might think this is happening too quickly. But I've never been more certain of anything in my life than I am of my feelings for you." Willow's breath caught in her throat. "And what feelings are those?" Tucker's thumbs traced small circles on her palms, sending shivers up her arms. "I think I started falling in love with you the moment I saw you by that creek, fierce and determined even in your distress. Every day since has only confirmed what my heart knew immediately. Love." The word hung in the air between them, at once terrifying and exhilarating. Willow had never imagined falling in love like this so quickly, so completely, with a man who had entered her life like a whirlwind. "I know it's soon to speak of such things," Tucker continued when she remained silent, "and I'm not asking for promises. Just permission to court you properly, with your father's blessing, to see if what I feel, what I hope you might feel too, can grow into something lasting." Willow found her voice at last, though it trembled slightly with emotion. "I do feel it too," she admitted, "though it frightens me how strongly. I've always prided myself on being sensible, on making careful decisions. There's nothing sensible about how quickly you've come to matter to me." Tucker's smile was gentle. "The heart rarely follows sensible paths, I've found, but that doesn't make its choices any less true." Before Willow could respond, a gunshot shattered the peaceful evening. It came from outside, somewhere near the barn, followed immediately by shouting and the sound of horses in distress. Tucker was on his feet instantly, reaching for the rifle kept above the fireplace. "Stay here," he ordered, all tenderness replaced by grim focus. "I will not," Willow countered, already moving to the cabinet where her father kept a shotgun. "This is my home too." There was no time to argue. Together, they hurried to the porch just as Harold emerged from his bedroom, pulling suspenders over his shoulders, his own revolver in hand. "What's happening?" he demanded. The answer came in the form of flames suddenly leaping up from the far side of the barn. In the orange glow, they could see figures moving, men on horseback, at least 4 of them, firing into the air and whooping like banshees. "Raiders!" shouted the foreman, emerging from the bunkhouse with the other hands. "They're after the horses." Tucker was already moving, racing toward the barn with Harold close behind. Willow followed, shotgun ready, her heart pounding with fear and anger. The raiders were trying to drive off the prized breeding stock kept in the corral adjacent to the barn. 2 men were already herding several horses through the broken fence, while others provided covering fire. "Holly's men," Harold growled as they took cover behind a water trough. "I recognized that one. He was with Holly's when he came here." Tucker nodded grimly. "Not surprising. He's trying to weaken us, make us desperate enough to accept whatever terms he offers." A bullet splintered wood near Willow's head, and Tucker pulled her closer, shielding her with his body. "We need to split up," he said. "Harold, you and the hands focus on saving the horses. Willow and I will try to put out that fire before it takes the whole barn." Harold hesitated, clearly reluctant to let his daughter near danger, but there was no time for debate. The flames were spreading rapidly, and the panicked whinnies of horses still trapped inside the barn cut through the night. "Be careful," he ordered, then signaled to the ranch hands to follow him as he moved toward the corral. Tucker turned to Willow. "Stay low and follow me. We'll go around the back where the well is." They moved through the shadows, keeping to cover as much as possible. The raiders, focused on driving off the horses and keeping Harold's men at bay, didn't immediately notice them. When they reached the well, Willow began drawing water while Tucker grabbed buckets from the nearby shed. Working together, they formed a bucket brigade, throwing water onto the flames that were consuming the barn's outer wall. "It's not enough," Willow gasped after several minutes of exhausting effort. The fire was too established, the flames too hungry. "We need more help." Tucker looked around desperately, then his eyes lit on the irrigation ditch they had been digging that ran nearby. "The ditch. If we can break through that embankment, the water will flow this way." Dropping the bucket, he ran to the earthen barrier that was directing the stream away from the barn area. Using a shovel abandoned by one of the workers, he began attacking the packed dirt. Willow joined him, using her hands to pull away the loosened soil. Their fingers worked side by side, dirt and water mingling with blood as rocks cut their skin, but neither stopped. Suddenly, the barrier gave way. Water burst through the opening, creating a small flood that rushed toward the burning barn. It wasn't enough to extinguish the fire completely, but it slowed its spread, dousing the flames on one side. "It's working," Willow cried, relief washing over her as intense as the water flowing past their feet. Their moment of triumph was short-lived. A shot rang out, and Tucker grunted in pain, falling to one knee. Willow turned to see one of the raiders had spotted them and was taking aim for a second shot. Without thinking, she raised her shotgun and fired. The blast knocked the man from his horse, though whether he was seriously injured or merely surprised was impossible to tell in the darkness. "Tucker," she dropped to his side, heart hammering with fear. "Where are you hit?" "Just grazed my arm," he assured her, though his voice was tight with pain. "I'm all right. We need to get back to cover." Supporting each other, they scrambled back toward the relative safety of the well house. From there, they could see that the tide of battle had turned. Harold and the ranch hands had driven off most of the raiders, though at least 2 horses had been stolen, and one of the hands was down, clutching his leg. The fire continued to burn, but with the water from the broken ditch and the efforts of men now free to focus on it, it seemed unlikely to spread to the main structure of the barn. "We need to check on your father," Tucker said, pressing a handkerchief to his bleeding arm. They made their way cautiously toward the corral, where Harold was helping the injured ranch hand. Relief flooded his face when he saw them, quickly followed by alarm as he noticed Tucker's injury. "It's not serious," Tucker assured him before he could ask. "How's Peterson?" "Bullet through the calf," Harold replied grimly. "He'll live, but he won't be riding for a while. The horses, lost 2 of the yearlings but saved most of them, could have been much worse." Harold's expression hardened. "This was Holly's, has to be," Tucker nodded, "a warning. And probably just the first." "He won't get away with this," Willow said, anger making her voice shake. "We can go to the sheriff, tell him what happened." Harold laughed bitterly. "Sheriff Byers, the man who plays poker with Hollies every Saturday night. He'll say it was just rustlers, impossible to prove otherwise." "Then we protect ourselves," Tucker said firmly. "Double the night watch, move the best stock closer to the house, set up an alarm system." As they discussed security measures, helping the wounded and assessing damage, Willow couldn't help reflecting on the evening's dramatic shift. One moment, she and Tucker had been sharing their deepest feelings by the fire. The next, they were fighting for their lives and livelihood. Such was life in this wild country beauty, and danger, inextricably entwined. Moments of tenderness followed by brutal reminders of the world's harsh realities. Yet somehow, standing beside Tucker in the aftermath of violence, Willow felt more certain than ever of the feelings she'd been afraid to fully acknowledge. Love wasn't a luxury to be enjoyed in peaceful times. It was a necessity that gave you strength when the world turned savage. And what she felt for Tucker was undeniably love tested by fire, quite literally, and emerging stronger. The days following the raid brought increased vigilance to the Daniels ranch. Every hand took turns standing watch, rifles ready, eyes scanning the horizon for trouble. Tucker's wound proved minor, requiring only cleaning and bandaging, but Peterson's leg needed the doctor's attention, reducing their already limited workforce. Despite these challenges, work continued. The damaged barn wall was repaired, fences reinforced, and the irrigation project proceeded, though now with strategic considerations about water access for defense as well as agriculture. Hollies made no appearance, sending instead a messenger with insincere condolences about the unfortunate rustling incident, and an offer to buy more cattle to replace those lost at a reduced price, of course, given the ranch's obviously precarious security situation. "He's not even trying to hide his involvement," Harold fumed after reading the message. "Just reminding us he can strike whenever he chooses. And that he has money while we're stretched thin," Tucker added grimly. "Classic intimidation tactics." Willow, who had been unusually quiet since the raid, looked up from the account book she was reviewing. "We need to take the fight to him," she said, determination hardening her voice. "Not with violence, but by strengthening our position so thoroughly that he can't touch us." Both men looked at her with interest. "What do you have in mind?" Tucker asked. "Alliances," Willow explained, warming to her subject. "Hollies has power because he's isolated us, but he's done the same to other small ranchers in the area. The Hendersons lost water rights to him last year. The Millers had mysterious cattle disappearances after refusing to sell land that bordered his property." Harold nodded slowly. "You're suggesting we band together." "Exactly. Shared resources, shared protection. Hollies can intimidate one ranch, maybe two, but half a dozen working together. That's a different matter. Tucker's face lit with admiration. It's brilliant. A ranchers' association of sorts. We could coordinate cattle drives, share hands during busy seasons, stand together against threats. Harold looked skeptical. Ranchers are independent types. Getting them to cooperate won't be easy. But not impossible, Willow insisted. Especially if we offer immediate benefits. The irrigation system Tucker's designing, we could extend it to neighboring properties. Our bull for stud services. Safety in numbers during drives. The discussion continued late into the evening, evolving into a concrete plan. Tucker would approach the Henderson and Miller ranches the next day, while Harold would speak with two other neighbors. Willow would draft a formal proposal outlining the association's structure and benefits. As they finally prepared for bed, Harold held Tucker back with a hand on his shoulder. "A word, son," he said quietly, gesturing toward his study. Inside the small room lined with books and maps, Harold closed the door and faced the younger man directly. "I've seen how you look at my daughter," he said without preamble, "and how she looks at you." Tucker didn't dissemble. "Yes, sir, I care for Willow deeply." "Known her less than a month," Harold observed, though his tone wasn't accusatory. "Sometimes a month is enough to know your own heart," Tucker replied. "I respect her too much to rush her, but I wanted you to know my intentions are honorable. When the time is right, if she'll have me, I'd like your blessing to make her my wife." Harold studied him for a long moment, then moved to his desk and opened a drawer. From it, he withdrew a small box. "This was my Elizabeth's," he said, opening it to reveal a simple gold band set with a modest diamond. "She always said it should go to Willow when the time came." He handed the box to Tucker, who accepted it with surprised reverence. "Sir, I don't thank me yet," Harold interrupted, a hint of his old gruffness returning. "I'm not giving my blessing just yet. This ranch needs to be secure first. Hollies needs to be dealt with. And I need to be certain you're here to stay, not just passing through on your way to somewhere else." Tucker nodded, understanding the conditions. "Fair enough. I'll prove myself worthy of both your daughter and your trust." "See that you do," Harold replied, but there was a warmth in his eyes that belied his stern words. "Now get some rest. Tomorrow we start building alliances." The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. To Willow's surprise and satisfaction, the neighboring ranchers proved receptive to their proposal. Years of Hollies' manipulations had created a reservoir of resentment that needed only a channel to flow into action. The Colorado Ranchers Protective Association was formed with 6 founding member ranches, including the Daniels property. Together, they represented a significant force in the region, enough to attract the attention of the territorial governor, who sent a representative to their first formal meeting. This official recognition was crucial. It meant that attacks on member ranches would be investigated by territorial authorities, not just the local sheriff who was in Hollies' pocket. It meant access to resources and markets previously dominated by larger operators. Most importantly, it meant Hollies could no longer act with impunity. The cattle baron's response was predictable. First came threats, delivered by intermediaries. When these proved ineffective, he attempted bribery, offering individual members special deals to abandon the association. When loyalty held firm, he turned to legal channels, challenging water rights and property boundaries. Through it all, Tucker stood steadfast beside Willow and Harold, his practical knowledge and quiet strength becoming the backbone of their resistance. The ranch hands, initially wary of the newcomer who had so quickly become a partner, now looked to him with respect bordering on admiration. Winter arrived with its blanket of snow and quieter rhythms. The cattle were moved to sheltered pastures, the irrigation work paused until spring, and the ranch settled into the season of repair and preparation. Evenings lengthened, filled with firelight and conversation. It was during one such evening, with Harold dozing in his chair after a hearty dinner, that Tucker finally found the moment he'd been waiting for. He and Willow sat side by side on the settee, close enough that their shoulders touched, a shared blanket across their laps against the December chill. "I've been thinking," Tucker said softly, careful not to wake Harold. Willow smiled, turning slightly to face him. "A dangerous pastime, indeed," he agreed with a chuckle. "Especially when my thoughts are full of you." Her cheeks flushed prettily in the firelight. Over the past months, their feelings had deepened, expressed in small touches, shared glances, and occasional stolen kisses when privacy permitted. But neither had spoken openly of the future, too focused on the present challenges. "What thoughts in particular?" she asked, her voice a touch breathless. Tucker took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm as he had that night before the raid. "I was thinking about choices. How you once told me that marriage should be a choice made freely by two people who respect each other, who see each other as equals." Willow's eyes widened slightly as she recognized her own words repeated back to her. "I remember. I've tried to be patient," Tucker continued, his voice deepening with emotion. "To give you time to be certain of your feelings and to honor your father's wish that we secure the ranch's future before planning our own." "And have we?" Willow asked. "Secured it, I mean," Tucker smiled. "I believe we have. The association is strong. Holly's has been checked, if not defeated entirely. The ranch is turning a profit again." He paused, gathering courage for the words he'd rehearsed countless times in his mind. "Which means there's only one question remaining." With careful movements, he slid from the settee onto one knee before her, still holding her hand. From his pocket, he withdrew the small box Harold had entrusted to him. "Willow Elizabeth Daniels," he said, his voice steady despite the thundering of his heart. "From the moment I saw you, I knew my life had changed forever. You are the strongest, most compassionate, most remarkable woman I've ever known. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears filled Willow's eyes as she looked at the ring her mother's ring nestled in the box. "Father gave you this," she whispered. Tucker nodded. "With conditions. That I prove myself worthy of you and committed to this place. That I demonstrate I'm here to stay." His eyes held hers, vulnerable and hopeful. "I hope I've done that." "You have," she assured him, her voice trembling with emotion. "More than enough." "Then what's your answer?" he prompted gently when she didn't continue. Willow's smile bloomed like sunrise. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, Tucker Xavier, I will marry you." A soft cough from the direction of Harold's chair revealed that the older man was not as asleep as they had thought. "About time," he grumbled, though his eyes shone suspiciously bright in the firelight. "Was beginning to think I'd have to suggest it myself." Tucker laughed as he slid the ring onto Willow's finger, then rose to pull her into an embrace. "Your approval means everything, sir," he said over Willow's shoulder. Harold waved away the formality. "Your family now, or will be soon enough." He stood, stretching his back with a grimace. "Think I'll turn in early, leave you two to your planning." As he passed them on his way to the stairs, he paused to place a hand on each of their shoulders. "Your mother would be proud," he told Willow softly, "and she would have liked him." With that uncharacteristically sentimental statement, he continued up to bed, leaving them alone. Tucker drew Willow closer, his arms encircling her waist. "I love you," he murmured against her hair. "More than I thought possible." "And I love you," she replied, tilting her face up to his. for standing beside me when I needed strength, for seeing me as I am, not as someone to be owned or controlled. Their kiss was tender at first, then deepening with the promise of passion to come not now, not yet, but soon when they would be husband and wife. "When shall we marry?" Tucker asked when they finally drew apart, both breathless. Willow considered. "Spring," she decided. "When the land awakens and everything is new again, it seems fitting." "Spring it is," he agreed, "though it will be a long winter of waiting." Her smile turned mischievous. "Then we'd better keep busy with plans. For the wedding, for the ranch, for our future." That future arrived with the April thaw, when the snow retreated from the valleys and the first wildflowers began to bloom in meadows newly green. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, the Colorado sky a perfect blue canopy above the ranch where they had chosen to hold the ceremony. The entire membership of the Colorado Ranchers Protective Association attended, along with townsfolk from miles around. Even the territorial governor sent a representative bearing congratulations and a formal certificate recognizing the association's contribution to regional stability. Hollis did not attend, though rumors circulated that he had been seen watching from a distant ridge as the ceremony took place. His influence had waned in recent months, his attempts to break the association thwarted at every turn. While still a powerful man, he was no longer the unchallenged king of the territory. Willow wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully altered and adorned with fresh wildflowers. Tucker stood tall in a new suit ordered from Denver, his face solemn with joy as Harold walked his daughter down the aisle created between rows of chairs set up in the ranch yard. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promises to love, honor, and cherish, to stand together through whatever life might bring. When Tucker spoke the words, "Until death parts us," his voice rang with such conviction that many in the audience dabbed at their eyes. The celebration afterward lasted well into the night, with food and drink flowing freely. Music from fiddles and harmonicas encouraging dancing under the stars. Harold surprised everyone by giving a toast that acknowledged not just his love for his daughter, but his gratitude to Tucker for saving both her and the ranch. "To choices freely made," he concluded, raising his glass high, "and to love that grows from respect, not possession." As the evening waned, Tucker and Willow slipped away from the festivities to the small cabin that had been prepared for them, a wedding gift from Harold and the ranch hands, built during the winter months in a secluded corner of the property. Inside, they found privacy and intimacy at last, the culmination of months of patient waiting. Their lovemaking was tender at first, then passionate, a physical expression of the bond that had grown between them through challenge and triumph. Afterward, lying in each other's arms, they watched moonlight spill through the cabin window, turning the simple room into a silver-washed haven. "Happy?" Tucker asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on Willow's bare shoulder. "Completely," she affirmed, nestling closer against his chest. "Though I keep thinking of how differently things might have turned out if you hadn't come when you did." Tucker kissed the top of her head. "I believe we would have found each other somehow. Some things are meant to be." Willow smiled at the uncharacteristic sentiment from her practical husband. "The cowboy has a romantic streak after all." "Only for you," he assured her, his voice warm with promise. "Only ever for you." As they drifted toward sleep, wrapped in each other's arms, Willow reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From a desperate flight to escape an unwanted marriage, to finding love with a man who had defended her right to choose her own path. It wasn't the future she had imagined for herself, but it was infinitely better, richer, deeper, and full of possibilities yet to unfold. Outside, the Colorado night wrapped around their cabin like a blessing. Stars wheeled overhead, coyotes sang in distant hills, and the land they both loved slept beneath the moon's gentle light, waiting for morning when they would begin the next chapter of their story together.